Join me today as I clean up and clean out my kitchen with some easy and freezer-friendly pantry, fridge, and freezer clean out meals. And yes, they are freezer friendly, even though we are cleaning out the freezer. I'll get to that in a little bit. Also, while filming this, I have a cold, so sorry I sound so nasally. And if you're wondering why you don't see my face much this week, it's because I'm looking like a mess because I'm not feeling great. With the holidays officially here, I've got to get this stuff out of my kitchen so I can make room for more stuff to come in. And every time I do this, no matter what time of year it is, I always find that I have extra pasta grains, sauces, condiments, some frozen meats, and canned goods. So I'm looking through my pantry, fridge, and freezer to figure out what I have too much of and how I can use it. But the first thing I like to do is take this stuff in the fridge, especially that I have extra of, and put it front and center so I know to use it and make a list of how I can use those things. I may or may not actually make the things I write down, but it just kind of gets the wheels turning on how I can use that stuff without wasting it. Scratch-made lasagna is not just comfort food, it's also freezer-friendly food. I have been pushing around the same box of lasagna noodles from shelf to shelf in my pantry forever, so I am using them to make a homemade lasagna and to get them out of my pantry. For the ingredients that I have in my pantry, a lasagna works really well because not only am I getting rid of the noodles, but I'm also using up some canned goods that really need to move and get off the shelf. So I'm using up some home canned tomatoes and a can of store-bought tomato sauce from Costco. I love Costco products, but I will say the sheer volume that they come in kind of stresses me out sometimes. So anytime I get to use that stuff up, I am happy about it. So here I am just making a sauce with beef, onions, tomatoes, tomato sauce, a little bit of garlic, and then I like to throw in some red wine vinegar, Italian seasoning, salt, pepper, and a pinch of sugar. And then I let this cook down until it's about halfway reduced. So when you're creating your clean out meals, it can be really helpful to think of recipes that use a variety of ingredients that you already have so you can move multiple things out at one time. The sauce is done, so I'm just layering here, putting some sauce on the bottom of the pan. Then I put dry noodles right on top. I do not pre-cook them. I just save myself the time. It works great. A little more sauce, and then I am putting homemade mozzarella on here. I have been recipe testing mozzarella. This one did not turn out aesthetically. I don't think there was enough acidity, but it still tasted great. So I'm using that, but you'll notice I'm not using ricotta because I don't have any ricotta. And the whole point of this is to not buy more ingredients to use for recipes. It's just to use what we have. In the past, I've even used cottage cheese instead of ricotta in my lasagnas, and it was delicious. I put this in the oven at 250 for about 2.5 hours. The time will vary for this, especially if you're using uncooked noodles like I am. It really depends on how much moisture is in your dish. So I would check it regularly to see how it's going. If you plan on freezing this, I would undercook it so it's about halfway finished. So that way when you reheat it, it's not mushy. I have a freezer meal video that I linked in the description box below. And in that I talk about freezing pasta dishes, so you can check that out there. And I know using this as a freezer meal seems maybe counterintuitive for a clean out video, but the reality is, if you were cleaning out your pantry to make a dish, you now have cleared all that space of unused separate ingredients and created one usable ready-made meal that takes up just a little bit extra space in your freezer. But it doesn't always have to be so complicated. I like to use up extra sauces and condiments when I'm doing this because those things, they end up sitting around for a really long time and expiring, and it's a waste of money. But if you use them, it not only saves some money and cleans things out, but also it kind of mixes up the flavors a little bit. I have a ton of candied jalapenos that I canned over the summer that I need to use up. And my favorite way to eat them is on cheddar cheese grits. And I know if you're not from the South, you're probably thinking like gross grits, but I'm sorry, you're wrong. They are delicious. I like to cook them in chicken broth and then add in some butter and cheese. And I load up my bowl or my plate of grits with tons of candied jalapenos. It's one of my favorite breakfasts to have, and it's really that simple. And that's a great way to clean things out. I also find that I almost always have some random bag of flour from kitchen projects or recipe testing that I have, and I have a bag of 00 pizza flour that I need to use up. So for this, I am making a sourdough discard pizza crust, and I'm actually going to freeze all of these so I can use them later. And I do want to note that if you don't have sourdough discard, you don't need to use that. There are tons of pizza dough recipes that you can find online that are great for whether or not you're using sourdough discard, but I have a ton of discard that needs to move out of my fridge. So I am adding in sourdough discard, flour, salt, and and store-bought yeast. I know, scratch made sin, but we need it for pizza dough, at least for today. And then I'm mixing all that together. Oh, sorry, and some water. And I'm mixing all that together in a stand mixer. I made 3 batches of this so that way I can have pizza dough ready to go in the freezer whenever I want it. Doubling or tripling up your recipes is a really great way to get things going. And sort of in the same vein as I was saying with the lasagna, it seems counterintuitive because now you have all this food in your freezer. But the reality is, if I have a bag of pizza flour sitting in the pantry and it's 5 p.m. on a Tuesday, guess who's not making pizza dough? Me. And probably not you either, if I had to guess. But if I have pre-made pizza dough ready to go in my freezer and I'm in a pinch for time, guess who can make a scratch-made pizza that night on a Tuesday because it's ready to go? So really, this not only cleans things out, but it also just makes life easier. Make-ahead freezer ingredients are a game changer for me in the kitchen. I have a whole video with my favorite make-ahead freezer ingredients that I've linked in the description box below. So the pizza dough is resting on the countertop for about 2 to 4 hours. I'll show you how I finish them later in this video. And while that's going on, I am making chicken and wild rice soup because I am sick. I had about a half bag of frozen chicken wings that needed to be used up, so I put them right into my Dutch oven. If you want to learn more about this Dutch oven or the others I use, you can check out the description box below for a link about my Dutch oven review. But I'm letting the chicken wings boil until they are to temperature and then taking them out to let them cool for a minute. Then I am taking some frozen fried chicken bones. If I have fried chicken, I just throw them in a bag and put it in the freezer and collect them until I have enough to cook down to save some money and to get the most out of what I'm buying. And I'm putting that in the same pot of water. Then I'm picking the meat off of the chicken wings. I don't really like chicken wing meat, so that's for my husband. And I'm throwing those chicken wing bones back into the pot with the fried chicken bones and letting it simmer all day. 4 hours later, the dough is ready, so I'm turning it out onto a lightly floured surface and dividing it into equal portions. I ended up with, I think, 6 pieces of dough. Simply, I'm just rolling it into a ball and I give it a little twist just to give it some tension. And then I bag each one individually in a small sandwich bag and put them into a larger freezer bag, and into the freezer they go to be used at a later date. And it's time to wrap up the soup. I like to make soups for clean out meals because I get to use up my leftover onions, any remaining carrots and celery, which I feel like I always have some stragglers in the fridge for those. And in this case, I actually had some that were about to go bad. So a soup is a great way to use up extra veggies. I strained the broth into a large bowl and then I just wiped out the Dutch oven that I used to make the bone broth. I'll take any opportunity to dirty fewer dishes. From here, you could freeze the bone broth. I have a link in the description box about how to freeze bone broth, so you can check that out. But here I am just moving on and making a chicken and wild rice soup. Then in the same Dutch oven, I'm sauteing the veggies. I don't always saute my veggies. It depends on how much time I have, but it really is best to do so because it does bring out the flavors more. I'm putting the broth into the pot and adding water because that bone broth cooked all day and was really condensed and needed to be diluted. I brought that to a boil, and then I threw in what I had left of some wild rice that I think has been sitting in the corner of my pantry since the beginning of time. This was a great way to use up a number of things in the fridge and the pantry, and it was a really delicious and healthy meal that was great while I had a cold. Usually I drop the recipes in the description box for you guys, but there actually are no recipes for these meals specifically, with the exception of the sourdough pizza crust, which came from King Arthur and is linked below. Of course, you can search Google and find something similar just about anywhere. But really, the whole point of this is there are no recipes necessarily for clean out meals because we are just using what we have. And I personally think this is a good thing because it stretches our creativity in the kitchen. It makes us think in different ways about what we're using and what we have. And it really draws upon our lived experiences in the kitchen and the things that we know our families like and how we can make that without spending any extra money and using exactly what we already have. Some of our favorite family meals have been created this way. I'd love to know what clean out meals you are making. Drop your ideas below in the comments and let's share what we are cooking. Thank you so much for tuning into Moon and Magnolia's YouTube channel where we elevate the everyday from scratch and at home. See you next time.